Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this webinar, and I thank you for taking the time to attend this webinar. My name is Stanley, and I am the Channel Services SCE, that based out in Southeast Asia. And basically, I'm going to cover the 10 best practices and configuration tips which you can set up and up your security game. What I'm going to cover in this particular webinar is the Veeam Data Platform version 12. And I'll also go through a little bit on the version 12.1 as well, because this was released in December 2023. Now, if you have any questions, please use the questions function on your panel so that you can actually submit your queries. And I'll get back to you on the answers after I run through all the deck at the end of the webinar. So I want to frame today's webinar and best practices with an understanding of cyber attacks in particular. As you're aware, there's a lot of incidences that happened over the past 1 year, in fact 2 years, with regards to cyber attacks. And basically, we're in Veeam, we do understand that the practical usage of secure backup comes into planning as well, because we want to make sure that you're able to recover the data once you back it up and ensure there's no reinfection when you reintroduce back to the production environment. And based on our 2023 and 2024 latest data protection trends and report, I want to run through some of the things that happens in the cybersecurity space. This is basically shows the cyber queue chain timeline. Ransomware moves within a compromised environment, from assessing to eventual encryption, and this impact your backup infrastructure as well. Now, this timeline shows the assess portion, which is where a particular threat actor or attacker performs a reconnaissance on your compromised infrastructure through means like social engineering or exploiting unknown vulnerabilities. Now, because the queue chain where attackers actually in the system can range anything from 60 to 180 days. So basically what they're trying to do is to discover any information that can be gathered, and ensuring that this information can be used to do a couple of things. One is to escalate any privileges, so that can change anything or modify anything in your backup infrastructure. And of course, evading defenses and exfiltrate any data that comes from the environment is also one of the priorities which an attacker will use. Once the attacker understands the compromised situation, an immediate pre-encryption process will take place. Now, this could be a simple, a small minute encryption that will be performed by the attacker. And basically, this allows the attacker to basically understand where this information is going to be used in terms of, your backup system or infrastructure. You can go in and delete your backups, snapshots, anything that is, critical in terms of for a customer like yourself who wants to perform restoration. Now, the real impact will be that encryption of specific files and critical data begins, and there's no stopping them, because once they know exactly when is a longer period, which in this situation, a late Friday night on a long holiday weekend, right, the attacker will begin the encryption process. So how do you basically, keep attackers out in your environment? And one of the very few things that we basically, look at is, of course, we want to keep attackers out. Work towards zero trust. Now, zero trust is a concept, all right? Basically, every aspect on your environment, you do not trust them because you think that is always a breach already happened. Always embrace the breach, which basically, things that you think for the worst. And one of the things that we basically introduced part of version 12 is using a one-time passwords, right? So BDP version 12 allows multi-factor authentication to be configured using a time-based one-time passwords or OTP. The screen shows a MFA enabled using the steps shown. You can also look at locking down every step of the way, including auto lockup timers if the BBR screen has no activity. This serves as a mechanism to prevent any unauthorized person from accessing the physical console. And what about signing into the BBR console itself? Because we may want to ensure that every time you sign on to the console, the person will require authentication across the different time that is the person is allowed to access the console. Last but not least, do always remember to have the BBR connect not connecting to the internet, because you want to get away all the physical connections so that attackers will not come through the internet and compromise the system. For that matter, the backup environment infrastructure should uh, be protected in that particular way. And one of the few things that we kind of look at is, of course, multi-factor authentication, right? So we use a time-based one-time password multi-factor authentication method. So any person who requires to access the backup console will be prompted with a authentication services, and you can use your authenticator of choice, right? You can use a Microsoft, you can use Google, or any authenticator that basically allows you to authenticate into the backup console itself. And of course, two of the options there, we want to ensure that anytime the physical console is not, there's no activity on a physical console, you want to lock off. And you can set timing, like for example, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, right? So that anytime that the activity is not shown there or is not happening on a console, you will have a auto lockout mechanism. And you want to ensure that a single session for the same user is allowed, because you want to ensure that that person, if this is a backup administrator, for example, who has the means to access the console, please ensure that they have access to it as well. Step number 2, we want to have customers keeping their data safe and consistent, right? Safe means basically you want to stop deletion, alterations, and accidental, changes to the system. And you want to be consistent because whatever you configured, you backup, you can actually restore them. And one of the means that we basically use this is we recommend the use of immutable storage and repository to ensure your data is safe and consistent. Have immutability as part of the data's life cycle in your operational and backup infrastructure. In fact, this is one of the rules that we set up in terms of providing a 32110 rule, basically to safeguard your backup data. This is to ensure no accidental or malicious deletion, right, and alteration in your backup infrastructure. And we want to make sure that you are looking at the best immutably options to do this. In version 12, there's an option there on the right side. You will see make recent backups immutable for 7 days, right? That is the minimum time that you can actually allow data not to be modified or deleted from immutable storage, and making sure that you protect your backup from any deletion by ransomware or malicious attackers in your environment. And you need to plan accordingly, because you may not need every backups to be immutable. Once you set the immutable storage for a certain time frame, you will not be able to remove them or delete them across. So if you ask me, if you're setting 365 days, you make sure that you have enough storage and time frame to do this, because for 365 days you can't even recycle or even delete whatever storage that you have in the system. Now, one of the tip basically is a block there that basically tells you how you set up your Veeam hardened repository. So use that tip in terms of designing your immutability storage in your environment. So we do support many immutability backup storage And of course, they are Veeam ready and certified vendors that has immutability as part of the storage platform. And we want to make sure that you choose the option that is for your requirements, big based on what you're trying to establish, right? So they are solutions that you can define as a Veeam hardened repository. In fact, for version 12, we do have a link that provides a certain setup that you can actually deploy and run it without any changes, so that you can actually run with it as quick as possible. Or you work with a on-premise or cloud-based object storage which has immutability set on, or work with specific vendors that has duplication appliances with immutable snapshot as well, right? And two of the well-known deduplication appliances, for example, like HP Stormons and Data Domain, which has also immutability flag set on, depending on the situation. But of course, you can also look at a tape library to provide a worm compatible, meaning write once, read many times, so that it has be able to complement the solutions coming from Veeam. So it gives you a breadth and depth of solutions that you can actually perform with immutable storage. Step number 3, right? Using secure accounts is one of the ways that we want to secure not just access to your console, but also to your backup, right? And one of the things that we have always been touting for customers, even before version 12, was to use the ability of password rotation, right? So you want to use secure accounts with, let's say, a group managed service accounts, which passwords are not stored in a local VPR server, but using Active Directory services, which the password can be rotated. As mentioned, a threat actor will always be on the lookout and probe for accounts that has password compromise, or passwords that are not easily changed, or in a way the password has not been changed for a long time. And if the password is not changed for a long time, this poses a security risk. As an example here, all right, this is a service account that is configured for a gas processing task. A group managed service account is the type of domain account configured on the server, right? It does not need the administrator to manage the password, as this role is performed by the Microsoft Windows operating system, right? Randomly generated complex password are automatically changed every life cycle, let's say 30 days, which reduce the risk of brute force and dictionary attacks. Step number 4. We want to ensure that you deploy an access control policy in your backup infrastructure, especially for customers who has, a lot of accounts that need to manage access to, let's say, a management components is crucial for a good protection, right? Use the privilege of least, use the principle of least privilege. Now, this provides the minimal privilege needed for some operation to occur. An attacker who gain high privilege access to backup infrastructure or servers, for example, can get credentials of user accounts and compromise other systems in your environment. An example shown here is a empowerment given to a user to perform restoration of their own files or objects, right? Because this is an event that requires critical files to be restored should it be compromised by a malware or ransomware scenario. And a lot of this has been built into the system in Veeam so that you can empower not just the users themselves, but also give a specific application users like your database administrator, all right, to perform the restoration, so that you don't need to raise any help desk tickets, because when you raise the help desk tickets, right, it may take a while for them to resolve, but you want to recover quickly on a critical application or a workload, right? You give empowerment back to the users. Now in 12.1, we basically take a step further. We have added the 4 eyes authorization enablement, so that as an S-bound operation to ensure secondary approval is required before any operation like deleting backups, backup infrastructure, modifications, or even adding a previous user, or worse, a compromised account that is added into your backup infrastructure, right? All activities that is performed using a four eyes authorization, or even the delegation that I previously talked about, log and send to a syslog service or to a SIEM-based environment for activity notification and email notification as well, right? We have added support for syslog and integration with SIEM or any other security aggregation products, for example, like XDR in 12.1. Now on the right, you probably see an option that allow the users to basically require an approval for sensitive operations, and you can actually go in and sign on as a backup administrator or a secondary backup administrator, whether to reject the request or approve the request, or whether this is a generic request that you basically look at, right? So that is found in 12.1. Now, four eyes authorization for destructive operation is there because you want to make sure that whatever you do in the system, right, require a secondary pair of authorization for any system operation or day two operation, right, from that day onwards. Step number 5. Encryption is something that we kind of, pitch about for the longest time, right? You use encryption in daily backup jobs to keep your source backup data secure. An example shown here is always to use backup encryption for any backup wherever possible, right? When an encrypted backup file or tape media is imported on a backup server, a user key with a password, or using a key management system server key is required to decrypt or encrypt the data. However, in certain situations where a password can be lost or forgotten, or the KMS server may not be available, for example, you can set up a Veeam Backup Enterprise Manager that lets any user decrypt such backups. Now, the encryption technology in Veeam Backup and Replication allows you to protect data while it is in transfer between the backup components and at rest when stored at its final destination, be it whether it's a repository, it's a tape, a cloud repository, or object storage. Now, customers like yourself can use one of those encryption methods or a combination of both to protect against unauthorized access to important data through all the steps that is found in the data protection process. So how do you configure them? Just like what I shown here, right? In your backup job, you enable the backup file encryption. If there is a password encryption enabled, set out a password, and then there you go. On the left side is where the enterprise manager is enabled with a encryption password loss protection, because you want to ensure that where information or if a password gets lost, the backup server will provide a challenge key for the enterprise manager, and using asymmetric encryption with public and private key pair, the enterprise manager generates a response which the backup server can use for unlocking the backup file without having the backup or the password available. The encryption algorithm used are industry standard, so in all cases, so leveraging on AES 256 and public key encryption methods. And they are always Veeam's alliance and storage vendors who provide capabilities, like encryption data at rest. You are able to be in control of your backups, all right, in the cloud or any other on-prem storage that has encryption at rest. You can also leverage immutable backups and storage, solutions. As I earlier mentioned about immutability, right? You can add those capability as part of your encryption and protection and securing your backup in the store, right, in your backup infrastructure. And in 12.1, as I mentioned, of course, the data encryption based on the built-in AES 256, we also compliant to FIPS 140-2 encryption module. So if you're going to comply to a certain legislation in your respective countries. We do support that. Earlier I mentioned about key management server integration. So as long as the key management systems that supports KMIP version 1.2, so we do work with 3 of the verified key managers that's available right now, right? If you use Thales Cypher Trust, we do support them. If you use Fortanix Data Security Manager, we support them. And of course, IBM Guardian Key Lifecycle Manager, all right? And of course, if you are concerned about assessing key management systems and you want to keep another pair of encryption key or password loss protection, right? As I mentioned, do introduce or implement a Veeam Backup Replication Enterprise Manager. But of course, there are also backup data integrity features where it kind of enhanced in 12.1. For example, like self-sufficient data format, you don't basically rely dependency on catalog, indexing, or deduplication database. We also have show backup and storage level corruption guard so that you can verify recoverability. And of course, there are aging control that is set on those backup as well. For example, any malware or ransomware will not be able to disable any data exploration or through a ransomware deletion exercise that deletes your backup, all right, from your backup repository. So there are multitudes of enhancements that we've done in 12.1. Step number 6, all right, do you know that Veeam also has a solution to provide monitoring and analytics for suspicious activity as well? So one of the things that we kind of find is a lot of customers do not basically look at monitoring for suspicious activity, especially in these times of cyber attacks frequencies across the region, not just in Southeast Asia, but across the world. You want to make sure that you're proactively finding threats in your backup infrastructure. Why? Because if a threat actor can actually goes in your system and stay in your system for 180 days, imagine what kind of information they will find. What is the gold mine to a threat actor is basically your backup data, which is basically in your repository. Now, when you look at a report that says that you have an authorized user who performs a list of action, you want to make sure that this authorized user is who this person say he is, right? If there are any suspicious user accounts that performs any activity, let's say in the wee hours of the morning, then you kind of want to make sure that you're being, be alerted on. And also you want to review the time of the day this activities takes place, right? So that you will know exactly where to lock down a particular information. Changes to your backup infrastructure, like for example, how many changes are made in a day or in a week, right? If there is a trending information that you can actually look at, this is important for any backup administrator, or from a security standpoint, you should lock down that particular user or a particular threat straight away, right? And of course, if you look at the right side, all right, modifications, right? Why is it there's a lot of modification based on just one user, right? It could be a service account that performs all this, right? But is it the right user to be using this to perform changes to the system, right? This is for any user who needs to proactively lose that, all right? And one of the product that basically, embodies what I mentioned, right, is Veeam One. Veeam One provides this capability in terms of proactively monitoring and analyze what's not, assumed normal in your backup infrastructure. And one basically important aspect on using Veeam One is not just looking at monitoring and analyze, but you want to look signs for indicators of compromise, right? You want to audit any backup jobs or functions or operation or files that is in the system. So you set up rules for tracking to make sure that you have ample information. In this case, in the chart, you will see a job configuration change tracking. because I want to report a detailed information of any job configuration changes that occur during a specific time of day or specific time that is performed by a certain person, right? Is this the right person to do this, right? Now, successful backup jobs doesn't mean that it's a proper backup to be done, right? Especially if there is a compromised environment that's already been done by an attacker, right? If there is a certain spurge or a surge in terms of a incremental backup size, or you find that your backup, storage becomes usage becomes more greater than before, or even that suddenly why your backup repository is reporting a drop in terms of capacity because or increase in capacity could be also a destruction by omitting a certain backup job or there was a deletion that goes on, right? So you want to combine with no backup alerts for advanced warning. Example on the right, for example, I set up a rule to say that if the incremental backup size reach a certain warning capability, I want to be notified. And it goes for all the jobs in the system, be it whether it's a 5 backup jobs or 20 or even hundreds of backup jobs, right? You want to be notified. And I also set up another rule to say that, if there is a relatively percentage in where the backup repository even, hit a certain threshold, I need to know about it, right? This is very, very important because we want to make sure that all alerts are being sent to the backup administrator. So that's step number 7. Now, step number 8 is where you basically get notification, right? Have a notification plan, right? Using Veeam One's alerts and monitoring capabilities to ensure that ransomware does not wreak havoc on your backup infrastructure. Now, notification plan could be your email, it could be your syslog servers that captures every activity. That includes, early on I talked about 4 eyes authorization, backup changes, or anybody who changed the system is able to get through the backup syslog, or events log in your VBR server, but also to reduce any alert fatigue for your security folks, because they may be getting a lot of alerts, not just from your backup infrastructure, but from a lot of workloads that already assigns to the syslog or SIEM platform. Now you want to respond accordingly. Action plan to shut down, let's say, a network adapter, raise alerts for security analysts to trigger a response on the VBR server, for example, using our 12.1 version incident API to trigger a quick backup so that you can actually contain a particular saving point so that this particular restore point can be used safely for restore because it has not been compromised yet. All right. So this could be also be scanning for known malware or ransomware using AV scanners as the example. And in the slides that I mentioned here in front of you, all right, you want to scope for different workloads. You may need to create different alerts for different workloads, as not two workloads may have the same, for example, CPU utilization or memory usage or write IOs, right? As you can see on the right, all right, we do have a N and an OR rule because we want to include things like CPU usage if there is a encryption that is available out there and you suddenly see a surge in terms of CPU usage, or you can also look at the data store rights or any storage rights in for that matter, right? So in terms of also command from a command and control basis, certain information may be exfiltrated from your environment, send it out the internet if your environment is connected to the internet. So you may want to do things like maybe disable a network adapter on the particular compromised servers and so on, right? These are scripts that you can actually run, right? So alert is something that you want to be introduced in your backup and infrastructure so that you can have a secure understanding of not just backup, but also secure your backup infrastructure. Now in 12.1, we take a step further, right? We provide a threat center dashboard for the Veeam administrator console right? This is embedded into Veeam Backend Replication version 12.1. Basically, it gives you a security health score of your data protection environment, right? On the right, you will probably see your platform scorecard. Now, this scorecard basically based on a security and compliance analyzer that you run periodically, right? There are certain checks that you need to disable or services that you do not need to use, or you need to ensure that you set up certain security checklists in order to perform all this. On the right side of the screen, you will see a malware detection. So threats detected by Veeam backup or external threat detection technology are shown there. An example is, I found a couple of suspicious restore points because that could be a ransomware node in the system. That could be a infected point in the system that have already discovered. And I want to make sure that, I should not use any of those points for restoration and back to production environment. And I can also look at specific SLA and RPO anomalies, right? And all this can be set in Veeam 1, right? And it is all contained and all integrated in the BBR server so that you can get an overview of the health of your data protection environment. And this is especially good for a certain, Veeam backup administrator to actively look at this. And then if there's anything that needs to be triggered on, right, they have to work together with the security analyst to perform whatever, remediate actions and so on. Veeam backup environment security, right? I mentioned we do have a built-in security and compliance analyzer. This is just on the right report that you run on daily basis to say what's being changed, what's not implemented. Now, over 30 security checks are in there. We only have used to be about probably 20, or I think 15 to 20 from a best practice from a security standpoint prior to version 12. So by having all this, you can perform few things. One, you will need to do things like Veeam backup server hardening, right? So that whatever services that is not being used or is being compromised, as you can see there, turn it off, right? Do not implement them, making sure that certain protocols are disabled, and implement multi-factor authentication, for example, in one of the sample reports that I ran. Always check for environment configuration verification as well, especially if you have outdated versions of SSL, TLS, right? You want to make sure that you have the updated version, especially for certain applications that require newest version of SSL or TLS should be installed and configured to do this. We also have a built-in scheduler and email notification of all the reports that you run so that you can continue to actually look at what is changes then and before and compare that, right? If anybody goes in and change, right, you want to make sure that these changes are not for the sake of compromising their backup infrastructure, but allow the user as yourself to go in and monitor them, right? And all the information that you see here are part of the Veeam monitoring and analytics alerts. So this could be always be sent to your syslog service, to email, right, or even to your SIM, depending on your requirements, right? And we want to make sure that your backup server, right, or backup infrastructure is in the best of health, so that you do not have any compromise or any situations where a threat actor decides to compromise your environment. And step number 9, right? We have 10 steps. So this is basically one of the best that I think will probably help a lot of customers, right? What's your plan in terms of planning for the worst, where a disaster basically happens? How do you build a proven or a well-documented disaster recovery steps, right? We do have a product in mind, right? To ensure that your recovery plans can be executed and up to date. There is a product in Veeam called the Veeam Recovery Orchestrator. that extends the functionality of Veeam data platform by orchestrating recovery processes with one-click recovery plans for any critical applications. And there are rich features that you can use for documentation and testing. Now, Orchestrator leverages the recovery capabilities of a Veeam backup and replication to build disaster recovery workflows, right? And it can also help users like yourself to automate any recovery process and eliminate any error-prone or manual steps that you think that you need to basically run it, right? The orchestrator also provides reporting capabilities, right, that let any users like yourself document their disaster recovery plans to meet certain compliance requirements. Now, with the orchestrator, you can do a few things. You can orchestrate recovery, you can recreate workflows, right? Um, Building into your plan what are the workloads that you need to recover automatically, right? And you can do this for both virtual and physical machines, and you can recover them to a certain platform, for example, like VMware, vSphere, or Microsoft Azure cloud environments. And it also has automated checks and tests to make sure that you can actually schedule checks and tests to automate verification of any recovery plans with features such as isolated test labs or data labs and comprehensive readiness checks as well, right, depending on the environment. And of course, last but not least, meeting compliance requirements, because any RPO or RTO achievements on the whatever plan that you set up, right, you must be able to show on the dashboard and generate automatically updated reports for any recovery plan, ensuring that requirements of compliance and audit are met. So you want to test your plan regularly. I know of some organizations do not do this, all right, but I know a few organizations that does it on a regular basis. So in a situation like this, you can also look at the target RPO and RTO. How long does your recovery basically run, right, without even the perform, so that it gives you an updated plan on how the target RPO and RTO looks like, and they give you a summary whether this are ready to meet a certain criteria based on the compliance. Now, this is also good for any person out there to generate a run to see how your recovery process looks like, right? You may not get the first round in terms of what you're looking at in terms of requirements, but as you go in and dictate basically where you want to do this, when you want to do this, how you want to do this, what are you trying to achieve at the end of it, and the proof that your recovery plans are well documented, that's where the Veeam Recovery Orchestrator comes in. Step number 10, all right? We want to give you ability, we want to give you a ability to not have reinfection that is already in your backup repository. So don't reintroduce the threat, right? I'm not sure if basically you come across our secure restore function, right? A secure restore function allows you to scan restore points with your antivirus software before even you restoring back to your production environment. Now, starting from Veeam Backup and Replication 12.1, you can also scan restore points with Yara rules. Now, Yara rules is used by a lot of security vendors or even researchers to scan for very specific threats, right, of malware. And there's tons and hundreds of malware, right, that is in the wild. So you can actually introduce specific Yara rules to scan for that as well. Now, Secure Restore is available for the following operations, right? You can perform using instant recovery, instant disk recovery, virtual disk restore, entire VM restore as well. If you want to restore to hyperscalers like Microsoft Azure or AWS, EC2, or even to Google Compute Engine, right? We do support that secure restore using AV scan, or just perform a disk export. On the right side, you will probably see a option that gives you a plan that is part of your Veeam, orchestrated recovery process, right? So having to scan that to make sure that your data that's already been backed up in your repository is clean, and making sure there's no infection, there's no malware remnants, there's no virus that's containing your backup before even you basically restore back to production. In 12.1, right, we also provide additional options for third-party security tools to be used, right? Prior to that, we already have Windows Defender, Bitdefender, ESET, semantic endpoint protection, right, to perform this using Secure Restore. In version 12.1, we included 2 or more third-party security tools and solutions into the Secure Restore. That is Microsoft Sentinel-1 and McAfee virus scan enterprise. So if you use any of those antivirus scanning tools, right, you can actually perform scanning the restore points with the antivirus solution. Having said that, we also have signature-based scanning, which can be scheduled or performed ad hoc. So you can actually choose a certain aspect on your backup repository, choose in random which are the workloads that you want to be scanned, so that you keep a clean backup already in the system. If there is a need to restore, you can actually choose the restore point that is clean for restore in terms of critical restoration. And we also use the signature-based scanning, which is integrated into Veeam Secure Restore. Basically, what it does is that it marks infected backups and restore points in the UI so that you do not choose them for restoration, right? So you remember you saw that in the threat center early on, that basically marks the infection point at a particular aspect. So you want to make sure that you do not use the restore point for restoration. And in 12.1, we also include Yara threat detection engine, right? Yara is used in a lot of aspects on incident response and digital forensics in terms of determining, basically where your threat is in your infrastructure or in your environment. And is usually used by a lot of researchers on any of those antivirus vendors themselves. And you can perform this similar to how you scan for antivirus using antivirus scanners, right? You can use an ad hoc Yara scan for a specific backup, right? It can be integrated in Sure Backup, right? Without having to basically power up a data labs to do this in 12.1, right? So you can periodically set a certain condition to be scanned in order to perform the ad hoc scan, so that you know exactly that this particular restore point is clean for restore. And you can use daily or scanning during incident response. Any of those aspects working in tandem with your security analyst, right? So basically this is found in 12.1. And this is very important because we have also introduced another aspect on threat detection, which is also inline scanning and during backup, so that whatever is performing the backup, or any remnants will be marked for situations where there is a remnant of virus or malware strain in the system, or any files that is determined by a threat actor to say that there is a particular file type that is recognized by the inline scanners as well. So just an example, right? A threat actor exists there as assessing your backup, and then suddenly on a certain particular day, and remember the last Friday that I talked about, where they perform the encryption. So if you use the Yara threat engine, you can basically detect the encryption event, and you want to look at a particular aspect on, is it a suspicious file, or you determine that as a particular file that has already been contained as a malware. And then what it does is that you can perform a couple of scans, right, using the scan engine, using antivirus, or a particular ERR rule scan. For example, in this case, we use to scan for a lockpick malware strain in the system, right? And then, of course, if we look back in all the restore points that is not clean or clean, depending on how you look at it. So in this situation, the last clean backup restore point that we basically look at is before day 7. Right? Why? Because day 7 is basically a encryption that is basically done by the threat actor and continue to do this for the entire duration of days that you look at. And we want to help customers to accelerate any clean recovery from ransomware while reducing the chance of any reinfection. Now, there are a lot of stuff that I've gone through today, but if you want to know more about what, inline scanning, Yara rule scan, four eyes authorization, how you secure a backup, there are a couple of things that you can actually get online training for. The 2 QR codes there is for the Veeam University, which you can train to basically look at some of the solutions that I talk about. We also have a YouTube channel out there. On and off, you'll see a corporate, presenters like myself and my counterparts in the US and EMEA providing certain capabilities, which is basically about the products that we have, right? And also looking at a certain um, things that you can find online, for example, like the user groups, the community hub, as well as you want to get, hands-on lab experience to look at some of the solutions that we have. For example, the ransomware, how do you basically go about it, recover from a restore point? There is a hands-on lab session in it as well, right? I do encourage you to go in and have a look at it, right? Have a go at it, right? Make full use of whatever resources out there. Now, if you need to look at very specific requirements, wherever you are, please reach out to your local Veeam, sellers or even pre-sales or technical folks like myself, right? Speak to them, right? Ask them about specific technology out there that can help you to secure your backup. Okay, with that, I end my webinar. So I'm going to look at whether there's any questions out there. There's one question. Yes, we will be sharing the slides with the participants of today, right? So, and definitely this will be given to folks who attended the webinar. Now, there are a couple other questions that will be come out, right? If I want to perform secure backup, monitoring capabilities using Yara rules, what kind of bundle should I be looking at? So the minimum bundle basically to run those solutions I talk about is the Veeam Advanced Edition, because you need the threat center to be enabled and integrate with Veeam 1, and Veeam 1 comes as a bundle in the Advanced Edition. But if you want to orchestrate the recovery plan in terms of getting the best out of, to draft disaster recovery processes or steps, right? It will be the Veeam Premium Edition, because you have the Veeam recovery orchestrator included as part in the system. So there is a question. I mentioned about those command line AV scanners that we integrate as out of the box, right? So if you have any AV scanners that is not listed in the list I mentioned, right? You can use that as long as they do have a certain command line that you can insert, all right, to perform the AV scan. My point is to all customers out there, even though it's not listed, do test it out, right? Making sure that you can actually, detect any, malware strain or any ransomware stuff in your backup, right? One good example here, I do have a question asked about using Trend Micro, right? This is an often asked question. The answer is yes, as long as you test it out, making sure that you can basically incorporate it as part of that particular option. Another question is being asked, is there any test license for existing customer to test on new release? The answer is yes. I do have a lot of requests coming from customers in previous version, but you want to test something new, you set up the environment, you test it out, right? Do speak to your local, in-country team. They should be able to get you some trial license to test it out, right? Okay, is there any questions? All right, we still have another probably 9 minutes to go. If you have any questions, please kindly post that in the questions and answer so that I can answer most of the things that is mentioned, right? Okay, one of the other question is being asked about, you know, looking at um, backup jobs, monitoring, right? So how do you basically, set alerts in the system and all that? So as I mentioned, Veeam one has the capacity to do this. So you can set a lot of alerts and so on, so that you can continue to monitor your backup, not just from the backup perspective, but also looking at your virtual infrastructure or your Veeam backup for M365 as an example, right? You can incorporate that as part of your Veeam1 monitoring and analysis platform. So another question comes up, Veeam1 is built in 12.1 or need additional license? Yes, if you buy the bundle for the Veeam Advanced Edition, it comes with Veeam1. All right, this is the only bundle that comes with Veeam1. So if you are currently on the typical Veeam platform, I'd rather that you speak to your local team so that they can get you some information for you to align based on the expectation, right? Do also, talk to them about, going through specifics on Veeam1. If I'm not wrong, the hands-on lab will also have a Veeam1 session which you can play around as part of a step-by-step sequence, how you can actually set up alerts and monitoring in Veeam1. Thank you for your questions, by the way. Good questions. Any more questions? Yep, definitely I'll share the slide. Thank you. All right, if there's no questions, let's see who put the hand up. Can you type, whoever put the hand up, can you type into the question so that I can answer? Thank you. All right, if there's no questions, I thank you for your participation today. Great to have you as an audience. Do reach out to your local Veeam counterpart, right, so that you can know more about the version that I talk about, some of the secure points that I mentioned in terms of securing your backup, right? And thank you for the participation. Have a great day ahead. Thank you.